Alrighty. You got Dino in the house from Ampeg live.
Hey guys, hey John.
What's going on, man?
Not much. How you doing?
Pretty good. Just hanging out on a nice Tuesday. It actually snowed a little bit in Chicago, so not too happy about that, but it seems to
Yeah.
have stopped. So it's our third winter here now. That's what they call it in Chicago. Is the springtime? It's like we had a little bit of spring. Now it's third winter. Then we'll have like actual spring here coming up. So
Right.
I don't know if it's like that right now on the East Coast, but you said it was a little cold.
Yeah, it's been cold. We had our last winter just last Thursday. We got a couple inches of snow here in New Hampshire, and yeah, it's still
Yeah.
kind of chilly out.
So
Yeah.
you feel it. Yeah, I know.
Oh,
But a lot of times I'm talking to these cats that are out in California or LA or something, and they're like, "Oh, it's like 75 and sunny." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah,
oh
I
yeah.
know." I'm sure you know how that goes, but yeah, man.
Well, the main offices for Ampeg and Yamaha are in Calabasas, so it's like whenever
Yeah,
I'm talking to those guys, it's like, oh, what are you talking about? It's 75 and sunny. I'm like, I gotta go shovel my driveway, so I gotta cut this meeting short.
yeah, yeah, exactly, man. Well, hey, really appreciate you being here and joining us live. And looks like you got some pretty good looking bass amps over there.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today here?
Well, this is the brand new Rocket Bass series that we literally just launched on March 30th, a few weeks ago. So
Awesome.
yeah, this is the whole series, 5 SKUs. Basically, we'll go from smallest to biggest. We get the RB 108, the RB 110, the RB 112, the 115, and then the 210. And we can get into specs and everything like that after. But yeah, it's basically it's a new design on an old concept that Ampeg had back in like the late 90s, which was the diamond blue era.
Okay.
And they called those rocket bases, but there were really only 2 models. There was the B50R and the B100R. And man, over the years, people have just kept on saying, when are you going to reintroduce or redo the B100R? It was such a great amp. And, so we've kind of toyed around with it. And obviously the combo amp, the market for combo amps is just out of control,
Mm-hmm.
for so many uses,
Yeah.
So we knew we needed to kind of address that at Ampeg and kind of revamp our whole look at how we're doing combo amps. So
Yeah.
that's where these guys came from. Yeah.
I feel like combo amps now. I mean, I don't know if it's me getting older or if they, they're just becoming, more functional or more useful. But before it was like we were talking before the stream. It's like everyone had the big 810 fridge cab, carrying it up the stairs and breaking
Yep.
backs here and there. And I think I probably shouldn't admit this at 31 years old, but I actually pulled my back out, carrying a big amp cab as a guitar cab. But I was like, man, I'm like, I need to move into a combo. But with the combo, I mean, especially with those, there's so much versatility. It looks like in the sizes,
Yeah.
as far as volume goes, or some people are worried about not getting enough volume on stage. You want to kind of talk about what the specs are as far as what you're getting out of those amps, by their sizes.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. So right now, this is the 108. This is a 30-watt single 8-inch speaker, single 8-inch driver. It's got the traditional Ampeg tone stack on this, just bass, mid, and treble. Everything is pretty much straight up flat on it. And I know, obviously I'm playing through the room into the mic on my camera here. So
Mm-hmm.
just advise me if it's too loud or too soft. But it's the other thing that is really, I know I'm sitting down, but it's super lightweight. I don't know what the actual spec is, but as far
Yeah.
as, but we took a lot of weight out of it too. Um, and then bass, I'm playing a BBP 35, which is basically just a PJ, passive PJ setup here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the 108. The next amp over is the 110. This is 50 watts. into a 10-inch speaker. Let's see if I can do this without falling over here.
Hey, if you do that, that's a win.
Yeah,
That'd be some great content.
So with the 10-inch speaker, obviously you get a little more bottom end out of it. 50 watts versus 30 watts. And my bass is terrible need of a setup. I know we were talking about this earlier. I'm dumb because it got so cold here over the last couple. So that's the 110, 50 watts into a 10-inch speaker. Then I'll come back down here into the 112. The 112 is 100 watts with an Eminence 12-inch driver. So with the 112, you still have the 3-band EQ, the rotary EQ, but then you also gain the ultra high and the ultra low like you have on the SVTs and the V4s.
Okay.
So you get a little more tone shaping capability there. So 100 watts into a 12. Then you go up from there. The 115 is a custom Eminence 15-inch driver with 200 watts. And then the last one is the 210, which is two Eminence 10-inch drivers, and that's a 500 watt combo. The 115 and the 210. Speaking of wondering if you're going to have enough volume on stage, they also have speaker out, so you can connect an external speaker to it, and that's where you get the full wattage. So the 210. I think the 210 is roughly like 300, 400 watts as a standalone combo. And then when you add the extension cab out, you get the full 500 watts.
Nice.
And same thing with the 115. You're roughly at about 150, 200 watts or 150 watts until you add the extension speaker out on it.
Yeah, that's perfect. So, I mean, you could go with, one of those amps there and that could be your sole amp. But if you needed something more,
yeah,
you're not limited, to being able to, provide more juice.
Yeah. But, and I think that's kind of the situation that we're in as bass players and musicians with carrying gear to gigs. I always tell people, man, any gig that I get a chance to play through an SVT, that's like, I'll always do that. But, with the advent of PA systems, and especially more and more players going to in-ear monitors, and then the features that we've put on all these amps, XLR line outs, and all sorts of cool things that just make it easier to carry an amp into a gig and set up and plug in and play. It's gotten so much easier for us over the years.
There you go. And I feel like bass players have been needing a little bit of ease because too many backs have been breaking carrying those big amps, man. Everyone feels bad for the bass player having to carry the gear in.
Yeah.
I think it is like you said, it's especially now it's like we're gonna start getting into gigging again. Coming up, thank goodness. And people are gonna want to play, and they're gonna want to take every gig or opportunity they can get to play. And if you can have something that's by your side, trusty, and not gonna break your back when you're carrying it everywhere. I mean, that seems like the perfect kind of approach to a new amp design. So is that kind of, you mentioned these were taken largely from an amp series from the 90s, but then you guys kind of put a modern twist on it, or what are some of the modern enhancements to them?
But one of the biggest modern enhancements is just the weight, the overall weight. So like we looked at our current the BA series of combo amps that we currently do. Mm-hmm. Great amps, a lot of really cool features. Construction wise, though, they're heavy. They're heavy combo amps. Like I think the 210, I want to say the 210 weighs in at roughly like 45, almost 50 pounds, because the construction of the cabinet is basically MDF or what do you call it? It's not a lightweight material. Any kind of MDF where you're incorporating glue and ply and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Whereas when we looked at the design of these, and I don't know the actual ply that's being used, but they went to a much lighter material. Mm-hmm. Couple that with Class D technology, so you're not carrying around big heavy transformers or big heavy amplifier in the amp itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that reduced a tremendous amount of weight out of the combo amp. We're still using traditional Alnico, or not, excuse me, not Alnico, but ferrite magnet speakers. People were asking, well, did you go with a neodymium design in the speakers? Like, nope, we're using pretty much traditional ferrite magnets in all of the speakers. So it was mostly in the cabinet construction and the construction of the amplifier itself.
Nice. Yeah, and I feel like that plays a huge part. I mean, Ampeg is such a classic brand too, and a classic sound. I could see why you want to still stick to as original of that Ampeg tone as you can,
Yeah.
but then also shedding some weight or making it easier for the modern player, which is something that a lot of people are looking for new amps right now. From my experience, because they want something that's maybe a little smaller and something maybe a little lighter, but they don't want to sacrifice tone. So that search is like, okay, where do you go from there?
Yeah, yeah, and it's been, since I've been with the brand, and if you look at the history of the brand, I mean, a lot of our sound is, I don't want to say, you listen to the Ampeg sound and it's a heavy sound.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like that,
Yeah.
and it's based on these big heavy amplifiers. This SVT here is 85 pounds. Because it's got big iron transformers with big copper windings, and there's a lot of it goes in to make that amp sound the way it does. And when you start messing with that recipe or changing things around in that recipe, it's difficult to try and keep that same sound or that same flavor, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's like funny. My grandmother used to say, if you're gonna bake, use butter.
Yeah.
Use oleo or margarine and fulfill the recipe, and it'll still taste pretty good at the end. But
Yep.
if you're gonna make cookies, use butter, because that's the way it's gonna. That's part of the taste. So
Yep.
it's been a difficult trip for us to try and reduce weight, make it more portable and easier, but yet still keep that Ampeg sound.
Yeah, that's awesome. So currently, because you're also, are you gigging bass player at the moment, or maybe not at the current moment, but what's your kind of go-to amp that you've been bringing out to gigs or been using the last few years?
The last few years, I'll tell you, I've been using actually that guy right there in the middle, the V4B.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm an all tube guy. It's I grew up with SVTs, so I've been using the V4B and the 212 cab for probably about, I'm going to say 90% of the gigs that I do. If it's an outdoor thing, or I know it's really an easy load in, or I know there's backline supplied, I'll bring an SVT.
Mm-hmm.
And then for like most of my smaller club dates, I'll bring a combo amp. I've been bringing a BA 115 or a BA 210 to the gig, and using that. But for most of my stage gigs and bigger gigs, it's usually the V4B and a 212 cabinet.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like that SVT tone, man. Like I'm not a bass. I can play bass. I'm a guitar player, and obviously see a bass in the background there that I have. But I've never been like the bass player for a band. But I always love when people showed up with the Ampeg, the SVT, because I'm just like, man, I know the bass tone's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
If someone's looking to go from that amp into one of these new Rocket Bass amps, kind of what would you let them know to reassure, like, hey, you're not going to be sacrificing that great tone, with this amp?
Yeah, great question. It's actually, and that's and going, and I kind of said this in one of my presentations to some friends of ours that we were talking to overseas. It goes both ways. So if you have a young beginner that starts off with a Rocket Bass, and they get used to the EQ and the architecture of how the amp works, going to an SVT is going to be so easy for them, because they're going to be so familiar with how does that bass control work, how does that control work. the two, the ultra low and the ultra high. Oh, geez, I get that on one of the big boys here too. It works the opposite way too, going from, playing an SVT to going down to a rocket bass. You go into like the 112, the 115, or the 210, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, ultra low, ultra high, bass, mid, treble. Wow, it's all, and they're pretty much voiced very similarly.
Yeah.
So when I turn up the bass control, I know what frequencies I'm turning up or turning down for that matter. The other thing that we've done with all 5 rocket bass models here too is we've incorporated a new circuit called the Super Grit technology.
Mm-hmm.
So SVT, we all know SVT stands for super valve technology or super vacuum tube. So because there's no tubes in any of these, we didn't feel right by calling it SVT technology because you say super vacuum tube, there's no super vacuum tube.
Yeah.
So we came up with Super SGT, which is Super Grit technology. And what that is essentially, so it mimics, it's an overdrive circuit, but instead of this harsh overdrive, it just kind of mimics like an SVT or a B15 that's just kind of being pushed into breakup a little bit. So like right now, this is with the SGT off. And let me know if I'm getting too loud here. But actually, just do my strings are grinding out here too. I gotta be careful. So if I engage the SGT, now I can adjust the grit control. And this is where it kind of gets like way gritty in this respect.
Yeah.
But, I also have a level control here too. So if I bring the grit up, I can bring the level down.
Ooh, yeah.
So I'm not overly loud. But where the sweet spot is like just a little bit of grit. My E string is really grinding out here, but
Dude, even just through like the live stream, camera and everything, and it sounds great.
Yeah, it's not, like I said, you can get that like really crazy woolly distortion if you want, but it's really geared towards, it's almost inaudible when you're listening to it, but when you hear it in a mix, you definitely hear the difference between the SGT engaged and disengaged.
Nice.
That's kind of where all the similarities come from an SVT or the B4B.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask too, and I had to bring this up because I'm a big pedal nerd, pedal junkie if you want to call them. And a lot of bass players I'm seeing are, every time I would go to a gig, it's like you see a bass player has a bigger and bigger board every time. They want to hang out with the guitar players and the effects and all that kind of stuff. Have you kind of been testing these amps with pedals, or how do they react with pedals? Is that something you would encourage people to experiment with, or is it more of a straight into the amp kind of tone?
No, absolutely. In fact, I believe the 110 through the 210 all have effects loops too. So if you're a loop type of person, personally myself, I like plugging just directly into the front of the amp. Especially if it's like a compressor or something that's more dependent on the output of the bass. But they're all, the preamps are all analog, so they take pedals really well. For instance, like I've been messing around mostly with most of the Ampeg pedals, like the off the comp compressor pedal that we've been using. They work really well. The chorus pedal, the Ampeg liquefier pedal, I think is, and not just because I'm part of the company, I really think that's one of the nicest sounding chorus pedals on the market.
Yeah.
And then of course, we have the classic preamp pedal, which is, putting a preamp pedal on top of an existing preamp never really made sense to me that much, because you're just stacking preamps at that point. But yeah, it works. It works great with. I have a couple of synth pedals that I use. It sounds great with that. I've actually been messing around with, because of our relationship with Line 6, I've been messing around with the Helix.
Yeah.
the HX Stomp and some of the effects on that. Those things, they're fantastic. You know,
Yep.
everything in one pedal.
Yeah, I love the Helix stuff. I mean, it it's amazing. I mean, Line 6 in general, as far as um, effects go, and the DL4 is such a classic delay, and the I remember when the first like pods came out, and my buddy's older brothers were, oh, look at this thing, you can get all these different sounds from. It's pretty incredible. But yeah, man, I think having the option to use pedals, I think, is a lot of people are thinking about that nowadays. What is this amp? How is this going to react to pedals? Because in my opinion, I think pedals are a great way just to kind of experiment or just add color to something that you haven't heard before or want to try. But obviously, going straight into an amp too and just hearing exactly what that thing is made of is super special in its own right. But yeah, man, I would love to kind of get my hands on one of those and plug my super absurdly big pedal board into it to see how it goes.
You can't let guitar players have all the fun, man. It's
you know what? I have one pedal board, and it's for guitar and bass. So
okay.
that's because people can say, oh, it's a guitar pedal, it's a bass pedal, but there's no rules, right?
No. And, it's funny. I see all these memes on social media about the guitar players look when what does the guitar player look like when the bass player has a bigger pedal board? And they usually like they're giving this look like, you can't have a bigger pedal board than I can, sort of thing.
Yeah, right. Like, come on.
I mean, obviously, as a bass player, I just love the idea of bringing a bass and an amp and plugging straight into the amp and totally. Just ripping through 4 sets like that. But there's times just for inspiration, even if you have no intentions of ever bringing a pedal to a gig, sitting in your practice room or your studio just for inspiration, that right there is worth the price of admission. Clicking on a sound and going, oh wow, I've got a really cool lick for that sound that I'm going to use to record this song.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
I dig it. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to ask you too, Dino. Like, I know everyone's telling me like, dude, you got to meet Dino. How did you get involved with Ampeg, or what's your origin story?
Until you finally meet Dino, you're like, yeah,
you're all right. Overhyped. No, just kidding, man.
It's a really long story, but I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. So, I moved back to Boston. I lived out in LA for about 10 years. I went to Musicians Institute, taught there. Did as I say, I did the LA thing for almost, moved back to Boston, and I tell people to this day, when they ask me, man, what's the best way to get into a local music scene? When you move into an area, go work in a music store.
Yeah,
because you're going to meet every musician in that local music scene. You know what I mean? And so that's what I did. When I moved back to Boston, I immediately went to go work at a friend's music store. And, so that got me back into playing with a lot of people that I didn't know from the first time I lived in Boston. But it also put me in touch with, I remember our Ampeg rep at the time would come in, and the store never carried Ampeg. So he was our crate rep because it was St. Louis Music back in the day. So he carried crate, carried Alvarez guitars, and obviously St. Louis Marketplace. And the owner of the store came down to me one day. He goes, he says, listen, he says, Bill wants us to carry Ampeg. And, you're the only bass player here, and we want to up our bass game. So what do you think? I was like, dude, I've been telling you to bring Ampeg in. Cool. And funny enough, I forget what the opening order was back then, but it was some ridiculous amount. It was a high amount. And I remember Bill, the owner, saying, he says, I'm going to bring this Ampeg gear in. If you don't sell it, it's coming out of your hide. And so, like, I got on the phone, called all my bass playing buddies. I was like, dude, we just got Ampeg. We got this. Four pros coming in, but I'll cut you a deal. And within a month, I saw the rep, Bill Norton, come back into the store again. He goes, I'm here to take another order. What did you do? I sold the Ampeg stuff. So yeah, go, and,
Yeah.
and at that point, it turned into, cause I was going to NAMM shows at the time too.
Uh-huh.
And Bill Norton, the rep for Ampeg, introduced me to Tommy Wilson, who was the product manager at the time with St. Louis Music. I'd go out to NAMM shows and just demo gear for them and come home and work at the store. And then eventually that just it turned into a full-time gig because
Yeah.
they needed somebody to go out and demo Ampeg stuff for them in all their stores, because all the reps, the reps would come to NAMM and they'd see I had kind of a sales pitch because I had a bit of a sales background, and they'd go home and they'd say, "Hey, can we get Dino to come out on the road with us to talk about Ampeg, to our dealers?" And it turned into a full-time gig, and I've kind of been doing it ever since for like the last 17 years.
Hey, man. And now you're doing live streams and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, now I'm learning how to work a webcam, for crying out loud. This is all new to me, man. It's the webcams.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I was going to say, because Ampeg, you guys do, you want to talk about a little bit, the SVT Thursdays, or
Yeah.
did I have that right? Or what do you guys kind of talk about on that show, and who have you had as some previous guests?
Oh man, so yeah, we call it. It started as SVT, like as in tea, the drink, TEA.
Ah, there you
SVT Time, and the original concept was I was going out to Calabasas once a month, and we were going to invite artists to the video studio in Calabasas and pre-record these videos with artists, especially as we launch new products. Have the artists come in, talk about new product. Obviously, with COVID coming up and everybody kind of being sequestered, it turned into a live stream.
Yeah.
So what we do now is it's a live stream that we do every other Thursday. It's still called SVT Time. It's myself, Dom Liberati, who's the Ampeg product manager. He's the guy that dreams up all this stuff, really. Like,
that's awesome.
Between Dom and I, Dom and I will meet. We talk almost every day, basically. But
Yeah.
he'll come up with the ideas and say, "Hey, I've been thinking about this. What do you think of this? Well, this, And when he mentioned a new line of combo amps, I was like, dude, it's a knockout of the park, because people have been asking for the B100R for the longest time. So he brings that to the table. I kind of bring the history of the brand to the table a little bit. So anyways, it's me and Dom, and we invite artists. This past Thursday, we had the great Jerry Jamot from Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
And, he gave us his insight of the Atlantic recording days back in the 60s and the 70s. Prior to Jerry, we had Chris Weiss from the Hollywood Vampires. We've had Tony Levin. We've had Rudy Sarzo, Phil Susan. It's basically our entire artist roster. And we just invite them on to talk about, like, what are you up to? What have you been working on lately?
Yeah.
Obviously, how has COVID affected your day-to-day life? Are you recording at home? And it's kind of like the conversation that you and I are having right now. It's just a very open discussion,
That's why I love these things. They really are just conversations about gear. Like, I mean, we all love gear. That's why we're here. I feel like you mentioned, the best way to get into a music scene is to work at a music store. ZZounds is completely online, but if you come to our Chicago office, I mean, there's hundreds of musicians walking everywhere, and we're all Chicago based.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where it's like, dude, I just love to be here right now. Just as far as being around gear and being around people that like gear and talking about it, and that's we're all kind of like nerds, when it comes to that thing. So it's a whole lot of fun.
I forgot to mention, like, when I first moved back to Boston, I went to go work at my brother's Hyundai dealership selling cars.
There you go.
That's where my sales background comes from. But yeah, it's the same thing. It was like I was miserable because there was nobody to talk music to.
Yeah.
Just there was nobody there. But you go work at a music store, you work in any kind of music environment, music school, music store, just hanging out with other musicians, man. It's just invaluable. It really is.
So when you're kind of testing out products or coming up with new ideas and stuff like that, do you kind of stick to your style of bass playing, or do you kind of do some funk stuff, do some pick stuff, do some do you kind of test it out through all the different styles and genres of bass playing, or how does that
Yeah,
process kind of work?
it's funny because it's like sometimes I get accused of being this slappity tappity thumb guy because in my videos I'll do the whole slappity tappity stuff, and guys leave a comments like, "Oh, there's Dino playing that same old tired slap lick." Yeah, I mean, some people don't dig it, some people do dig it.
Uh-huh.
Uh, in terms of myself as a player, no, I consider myself a four-string player with a fifth string that just has five extra notes, so I can compete with keyboard players. Uh,
There you go.
that man, it's like, I mean, the root of my playing is,
Hey man, holding down the bass line.
and that, yeah. So yeah, in a lot of ways, it's funny because when we go back to the drawing board and we start talking about new designs and stuff, I'm kind of like, I'm the I don't want to say I'm the old fuddy duddy, but I'm the guy that's been with the brand for 17 years and doesn't want anything to change.
Yeah.
And then, and I'm talking to, obviously I've got Dom there who's a younger cat, great player by it. Dom's an amazing bass player as well. And there's a bunch of amazing musicians at Yamaha Guitar Group, Line 6, but they're all sort of like these guys come from the Line 6 way of thinking and very ingenuitive and intuitive and
Mm-hmm.
want to be groundbreaking. So they'll come and say, "Hey Dino, what do you think about this ultra modern idea, and we're going to put it in SVT?" I'm like, and I'm the guy that's going, "Oh, no, hold
Too
on."
much change. Too.
It's like, I'm the old Harley rider, man. I like the motorcycles that leak oil on the garage floor.
Yep.
So but yeah, so yeah, when it comes to my playing, I'm kind of the old school guy that the less notes that I play on a gig, the better. Um, but yeah, it's been an interesting dynamic because we want to, obviously we want to innovate new amps, and to do that, sometimes you got to think beyond a 300 watt all tube amplifier. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of where I have to kind of step aside and go, okay, I trust you guys implicitly on this, and I agree. So I'll just stand over here and shut my mouth and just let I'll trust the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And,
Pickety flickety Dino over here. Whatever.
I mean, I do. I like the slappity tappity stuff. It's just you know when you're, especially like if I'm playing at home, if I'm playing in front of my kids or my wife, or
Uh-huh.
nobody wants they go, "Oh, yeah, that's nice," until you go, or yeah,
Oh yeah.
and everything is bottom. And I'm gonna have to change bases here in a minute, but I'm sure you guys can hear that too. It's not liking the cold weather down here today. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna work for you.
Yeah, that's all right. You gotta play the instruments to figure out what you need to do to work on them. So I
Yeah,
need to, like I was telling you earlier, I need to set up all my guitars, man. I think there's probably a lot of us in that boat between just different bass players and guitar players.
yeah,
But yeah, man, I really appreciate you kind of going over these bass amps. I wanted to ask you too, like, if you're a new bass player kind of coming into the instrument, um, and you don't really know what style of music you want to play or what you've kind of grown into, um, would these work for someone who wants to play like in a punk band, or someone that wants to play in a funk band or a country band, or is the versatility on these kind of covering all of those different
yeah,
aspects?
yeah, absolutely. It's yeah. To answer that in a very short form, yes,
Yeah.
they work in every style really. Um, from, like I said, when we started working on this, it was like, all right, so who are the customers for these amps? And it was a really tough question because you kind of have two different customers here with the little,
Mm-hmm.
the 108 and the 110. You kind of have the beginning player that's just kind of picking up bass, or myself that just wants a small amp to stick up in the living room to play around with.
Yep.
But then you have these three that are great practice amps, but now you're getting into the live setting stuff too, where you can take them out on a gig and jam with them.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, if you look at, again, I go back on the history of the brand, but if you look at the history of Ampeg, you see an SVT behind the Ramones, but
Yep.
then you'll watch an old Marcus or an old Miles Davis video with Marcus Miller playing. Somebody pointed this out to me a couple of years ago. It was Marcus Miller playing through an SVT behind Miles Davis, and it was like, you'd expect it to sound like the Ramones, but it sounded like Marcus Miller. You know what I mean?
That's got to be an incredible like realization just looking at that and being like, wow, that can those are two completely different styles of music.
I mean, people look at the SVT and generally it is viewed as a rock and roll bass amp. That's because that's just the genre that it's been used in so many times. But I mean, it really satisfies so many different genres of music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are some, when you start getting into like, like more like people look at the SVT and say it's definitely not a hi-fi amp. No, it isn't a hi-fi amp. But if you want a hi-fi amp out of the Ampeg line, go with an SVT4 Pro and maybe one of our Pro Neo cabs that has a port and a horn in it that, guys like Stanley Mark plays through. That's his go-to rig because it kind of departs from this a little bit more. It gets more into the hi-fi type sound.
Totally.
But yeah, this stuff goes, man. This satisfies pretty much any genre of music you want.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I think from if I can think back this long, when I was starting out playing guitar at least, there would be times I'd hear like a Blink-182 song and be like, I want to sound like that, or I'd go into a guitar lesson and learn an old Led Zeppelin riff or something. It's kind of all over the place. But then as you get older, you kind of fall into your style and your sound and things like that. So having an amp like the Rocket Bass line, I think is perfect for someone that's trying to find that style, find that sound, and kind of make it their own. And then like you said earlier, upgrading in then to the tube amps or the SVT tube amps like you have behind you, they're going to be familiar with it and they're going to know how to dial in that same sound that they've been working on with these amps. I think it's just a really cool possibility with those amps and the new players that are coming up.
Yeah, I think that's important too. It's like, I think it's real important that a player, I don't want to say sticks with one sound. That's obviously not what I'm getting at, but kind of sticks to what feels good to them.
Yeah.
And what works for them.
Yep.
So like, I'll tell you a very famous bass player who I won't mention plays a different brand of amp, which is a completely different sound from the Ampeg sound, but he's a real good friend of mine. And he's like, hey dude, can I check out some amps? Yeah, absolutely, man. Whatever. It's and he had the amps for a couple of months. He called me up and was like, man, I really want to like the brand. And I love you as a brother and a bass player. And it's, I like talking with you and this and that. Ampeg's got such an amazing history. It's just not my sound though.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, that's totally understandable.
Totally.
You've been playing this sound for so many years, just like I've been playing this sound for so many years that, I could go to this sound and make it work and make it sound good. But it just doesn't feel natural.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he was telling me. It was like, it just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't, like, it's not doing what I need it to do. It's like, then play what you've been playing, brother. Stay with what you've been staying with. And that's what I tell people. Guys come up to us at the NAMM show all the time. It's like, we're going to build an amp that does this, this, and this. It's like, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, maybe never, because that's out of our comfort zone. But on the flip side too, it's we want to invite those new players in, those newer players that are looking for a different sound. That player that loves the Ampeg brand, and loves the mystique behind it, and loves the history behind it, and loves the people behind it. You know,
Yeah, totally.
um, but we want to build something for them too, so that they'll have an amp that they're comfortable with too, that they can grow with, from a combo amp all the way up to a big concert flooring.
I love that, man. Yeah, I think that's super rad, and just a great spot for people to start. And like you said, it goes both ways. If you're already rocking the big tube amp and you want something that's a practice amp, you can grab Rocket Bass. Or if you want to
Yeah,
just downgrade but still have an amp that can produce enough volume for live, you can go with the bigger side of the Rocket Bass amp. So the versatility there is astounding.
yeah,
And I just, for me personally, that's, as a kind of a bass as like a secondary instrument, that's like what I would want to go with, is something that I would have versatility with. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming in and chatting with us about these amps, and kind of giving us some scoop on your personal history with Ampeg, and just talking and chatting. But is there anything else you wanted to kind of leave off with before we dip out here?
oh man, we could talk for hours, but
I know, right? It's like I have to cut myself off sometimes, especially with how much coffee I've had.
you know it gets lonely in these studios by ourselves, right, John?
I know, right? It's like, hey, don't leave yet, man.
I can talk before we got, some days I come down, it's like, oh shoot, I forgot to shave today.
Oh man, I feel you, dude. I feel you. I just shaved my head. I don't know if anyone notices me from the past streams, but I had longer hair that was always hidden under a hat.
Okay.
But I just went. And I was like, summer's coming.
Yeah.
New season, new me, man. I'm gonna I'm gonna just shave my head off, or shave my hair off. So, but yeah, dude, I feel you. And hopefully, you can come out to Chicago, or I can come out to the East Coast, and we can,
you're, you're
hang
always
out.
welcome here, man. You're always welcome. um we got to go catch a Cubs game.
I
How's
was
that?
literally just gonna say, I was like, when the Cubs play the Red Sox, in that one moment where they do, hopefully at some
Even if
point.
Fox, I'm always a fan of the sport. So just sitting in Wrigley Field, having a cold one, a hot dog, and
Oh, dude, you're
you
speaking
know,
my language.
yeah,
I love that. Well, yeah,
yeah.
man. Well, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Feel free to hit the link that we have going to the Rocket Bass series at zZounds, so you can grab those there. And yeah, everyone have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon, Dino.
Right on, John. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, man. Bye.
All right. See you guys.